Miss Richards, I think our next witness would wish to be known as Maggie.
Yes.
Please state your full name
Margaret Madden.
and take the book in your raised hand. Just hold it.
Right.
And repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing
and
but.
nothing but the truth. Thank you. Hi.
Maggie, you're here to talk about your son Daniel
Yes.
and your mother, was also
Margaret Madden.
And also you're going to say a little about your cousin Ronald.
Yes.
Now, your mother, unusually for a woman, herself had haemophilia A.
Yes.
And when you were in your teens, you were tested to see if you were a carrier.
Yes, I was.
And you were.
Yes.
You had 3 sons. We're not going to name 2 of them. But your youngest son was Daniel.
Yes.
And Daniel was born in 1971. And he did indeed have haemophilia.
Yeah. He was born with haemophilia. Yeah.
Would you speak a little closer? You're very
He was born with
softly
haemophilia. Is that better?
spoken. Much better, thank you. Now, for the first few years of Daniel's childhood, he didn't experience many problems.
No.
But you described in your statement how from the age of about 6 he began to have recurrent bleeds. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And how did the haemophilia impact upon Daniel's life?
Well, it stopped him playing out, stopped him being with his brothers, stopped him from doing normal things that boys do, because he just couldn't do them, because he'd end up black and blue, or he'd cut himself and bleed, or he'd bleed inwardly and his legs to be swollen. So, intravenous drips in them days.
Yeah. So he'd start off with the drips. He was under the care of the Children's Hospital at Pendlebury.
He was.
And he'd have treatment with cryoprecipitate, but then a time came when he moved on to having factor 8 treatment.
Yes.
And you think that that was probably sometime in the late 70s, but you're not
Yeah.
precisely sure.
Everybody did it all at the same time, more or less, actually. We were all taught.
And you were taught how to administer it at home.
Yes.
And you've said in your statements you jumped at the chance because you thought that would make a more normal life for Daniel and also make life easier for his brothers because they wouldn't have
Well,
to
yeah,
carry the
because
hospital.
every time Daniel had a bleed and went to Pendlebury, the boys had to come out of school and go.
So you learnt to administer the factor 8 to Daniel and also to your mother and indeed to your cousin Ronald as well.
Yeah.
Now, you've explained in your witness statement that Daniel, you put together from bits and pieces of medical records, he had a number of different products. In 1978, you think he had a factor 8 product supplied by Armour Pharmaceuticals. And then in 1979, he was given factor 8 on a number of occasions at the Newcastle Royal Victoria Infirmary. Is that
He
right?
was, yeah. He had an operation on his knee.
And we can see, if we have up on screen, please, Paul, 1364002. We can just see there, Maggie, the date's 1979, and we can see on the right-hand column a range of occasions in which he was given factor 8. Sometimes it's recorded he's given haemophil.
Yeah.
And those occasions that were actually administered at the hospital.
Yes.
Now, you've described in your statement recalling one occasion when you had to go back to Pendlebury Children's Hospital and return the factor 8 that you'd been given. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Everybody did.
And were you given a reason for that?
They just said it was something wrong with the labels, so they gave us all different treatment.
Were you ever told, as Daniel's mum, of any risks associated with the use of the factor treatment?
No, we just thought it was a miracle, really, because at least the family could have some kind of a proper life, and you didn't have to go running backwards and forwards to the hospitals, and the children could go to school. And in fact, Daniel started school as well.
And Daniel went to a range of different schools. You moved around a little. He went to a school called Welburn Hall School for a while.
Yes, he did.
And then he went to Summer House School.
Yeah.
And there were nurses there at the school, and they knew about his
Yeah.
haemophilia. He really enjoyed it there. And he'd be given his factor 8 at the school.
That's right.
Now, we're into the early 1980s. You started to be aware, to notice that Daniel was suffering from a lot of colds and sore throats.
Yeah.
What can you recall about that?
Well, I thought it was because he started school, really. Because, you know, get all these kind of different things, coughs, colds, runny noses. And I just thought it was that was doing it. But there was all, within a, you know, he'd no sooner get rid of one than he'd start with something else. So
And you've described that you noticed he was sleeping more and
he was very
started,
tired, yeah.
He started
Yeah.
to lose weight.
Yeah.
But he was having checkups at a local children's haemophilia clinic and at school by the school nurse, and you were told that there wasn't anything to worry about.
That's right.
You then explained in your statement about 1982, Daniel had another operation on his knee, and then he was given factor 8 again on that occasion at Newcastle.
That wasn't Pendlebury, that was Newcastle.
That was Newcastle.
Yeah.
Now, just tell us a little about what Daniel was like, would you?
If he could climb it, he'd climb it. He was a typical lad. He was always up to something. And if his brothers went somewhere, he'd hide, so they'd walk past him and he'd follow them wherever they were going. So he was really a boy. Even though he had problems and he knew the consequences and he'd be in agony, he still wanted to be part of that. He was not one of these little quiet boys, unfortunately. He was a proper lad.
Now, it was in about 1985, sometime in 1985, when Daniel woke up in the night. He was feeling very sick, and you noticed he had spots on his stomach, and you called the GP.
Yes.
Can you tell us what happened?
The GP came, knocked on the door, I opened the door, and he just stood in the doorway, because it was like a walk-in house. You know, we walked through the front door and you're in the living room. And he said to Daniel, just lift up your pyjamas, son. And he did. He went, chicken pox, Calpol, and calamine lotion. And that was it. It was gone.
But you
Nothing else.
described that the doctor didn't come into the
No,
house,
didn't come in.
stood at the door.
Yeah.
Was that unusual?
Yeah. But in your mind, you think it's because he's got chicken pox and he's going to visit other people. So you don't... It clicks, but it doesn't click, if you know what I mean. You just think you don't want chicken pox.
And you think now, with the benefit of hindsight,
He knew.
that was shingles rather than chicken pox.
Yeah.
And you think now, again, putting two and two together, that doctor had some knowledge that Daniel, in fact, had something rather more seriously wrong.
Yes.
Daniel didn't get better, and the spots were turning into sores, and they were
They
bleeding.
were going together. Instead of being individual spots, there was clumping together.
And you said in your statement he was being sick, he was losing weight.
He was yellow. Didn't want to do anything. He was just another kind of boy, what he always was.
And then one of your other sons came running into the room and called you because he said Daniel was bleeding bad.
Yeah.
What was wrong?
The sores had started, well, they were weeping anyway, and obviously I was using this calamine lotion, like you do, and nothing was happening, but the sores had actually, the spots had actually turned into sores, and there was round here on his stomach, and they were weeping badly, but they were bleeding. So the first thing I did is like jump out of bed, sort him out, and then strip his bed and everything. And I thought, how can there be chicken pox? It can't still be here. So with that, I went back to Pendlebury Hospital. And when I got there, I had to phone the ambulance because my husband was away and I didn't have the car. So I had to phone the ambulance. They took me to Pendlebury Hospital, and they wouldn't let me in the hospital. They came into the ambulance. And the nurse came in with a a mask on, gloves on, gown, everything. And even the ambulance men didn't understand why I couldn't go into the haemophilia centre. You know, it's only chicken pox, you know what I mean? But they just said that's it, giving 2 bottles of Factory every other day, prophylactic treatment, and carry on with your calamine lotion and your Calpol.
And this wasn't the normal way you were treated when you took Daniel to the
No.
haemophilia centre?
No, I used to get him out of the ambulance, or if I had to carry him, or the ambulance men would carry him into the centre. We all just went into the centre. Everybody did it, just went into the centre. But there was no way he was going in there. She wouldn't let him in.
There were 2 things unusual. You weren't being allowed in. You were told, all of you, to stay in the ambulance,
Yeah.
and the nurse came out to you.
Yeah.
And secondly, the nurse was wearing gloves and a mask and gowned
Yeah.
up, and that wasn't the normal procedure.
No.
Now, you did as you were told. You went back home. And then it was that weekend, you think, there was a knock on the door and some Jehovah's Witnesses, and you bought a magazine.
I did. I bought the Awake magazine, which I often did, and put the kiddies to bed and everything. And I was sat there and just having a read of it. And in the magazine was a piece about that big, about people dying in America of what they called a gay plague. And I was reading it, and the symptoms was spots that turned into sores and dizziness and sickness and tiredness. And my head was just, I'm thinking, it can't be. How can it be? It can't be something like that. But after the experiences I've had at the hospital and the doctor not coming in, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. So I took him back to Pendlebury Hospital. The clinic was on, and I thought, right, I'm going to the clinic. So I went to the clinic, and I took him back to the hospital there, straight into the clinic, because I was driving that day. And when we walked in, Daniel went, what are they going to do to me? I went, nothing. But even the doctor in the clinic had the same things, the gloves, the mask, the plastic apron, the nurse, and the other lady who used to talk to you like a social worker. Even she was gowned up. And that was not just for Daniel, that was for the whole clinic. So I told them what had happened and what I'd read and everything else, and they just said, you're just imagining it and you're just getting hysterical over nothing. There's nothing wrong with him, it's your imagination. You're just getting too upset over nothing. So, of course, by this time I'm crying, I'm screaming, I think you're lying to me, blah, blah, blah. There's something going on and I want to know what it is. And they escorted me off the premises. So as I come out of the room, I told everybody in the centre what I'd read and what I'd heard, and they just couldn't get me out the door fast enough. So I never went back.
You described that night, having been sent home from the hospital. You were awake all night, you couldn't close your eyes, you kept going into the room to check that Daniel was all right, but also to check that Daniel wasn't in the same bed as his brothers, because you were worried about them.
It's an awful thing to be worried about your other 2 sons, because one could infect them with something. But yes, I was. Up and down all night.
So you kept the children off school after that?
I did. And I knew the only person that ever spoke any truth was the RVI in Newcastle. So I phoned him up and I asked him could I come up and visit and could I speak to him. And he said, well, you'll have to get here as soon as you can, and, you know, we'll see you, and if not, then, you know, you can come to the clinic in the morning. But I had a friend who lived up there anyway, and I thought if I can't get in, if I can't get there enough time, then I'll stay with her, then I'll go up to the clinic. Anyway, I was going up the M62, and I'd just got on the A1, and nearly said it then, didn't I? One of my sons said to me, Mum, Daniel's bleeding. So I said, right, okay, so I come off the A1 and parked in a little lay-by thing. And when I turned around, I couldn't believe my eyes. He was covered in blood. My 2 sons was covered in blood. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. So I jumped out of the car, ripped my blouse off and tied that round him, and got a towel out of the boot and tied that round him. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I got them all back, 1 in the front and the other 2 in the back, separated. And the look on my face must have been horrendous for the boys, because they were like, we haven't done anything. I said, no, just don't touch him. Just don't touch him. I was an awful thing to say about your son, but that's to be said. Anyway, I got back in the car and I started to drive to Newcastle. And the petrol, I didn't know how much petrol I had. My head was all over the place. Daniel was still bleeding. So instead of going there, I went the other way to Middlesbrough, which was nearer. I got to Middlesbrough Hospital, got the two boys out of the car, got Daniel out, and I'm carrying my son, who was looking like he was asleep and so pale. I've never seen anything like it. And the other two boys was like coming behind me. I didn't even lock the car, to be honest. I was just away in the hospital, and they just helped me. They just came running in, took Daniel off me, took the boys. I'm in this babbled English trying to tell them what was going on, and that I was on my way to the RVI and this, and they just took over everything. And they put Daniel on pints of blood and what have you. And I found out, they phoned the RVI and told them I was there. And one of the nurses from the RVI came down in an ambulance to take Daniel back up there. But in Middlesbrough, they told me he had 3.5 pints of blood left in his body. And if I hadn't done that, he would have died. And
they arranged for an ambulance to take you from Middlesbrough to Newcastle.
They took Daniel and I followed behind him.
And a matron from Newcastle came down and travelled in the ambulance with Daniel. And indeed, Middlesbrough Hospital gave you some money because you didn't have money for the petrol.
They did, actually. I had no money. I didn't have... well, when I left home, I had £30, but I bought them sandwiches and crisps and put petrol in the car, like you do. And I didn't have enough money, so they actually gave me £50 to get me up to Newcastle and to see me through.
Daniel was admitted to the hospital in Newcastle.
Yeah.
And treated.
Yes.
And you were given tea and sandwiches and looked after.
They actually gave us a room for myself and the two boys. Daniel was obviously, they was taking care of Daniel on the ward. Then eventually got the boys sorted and they fell asleep and I went outside. And I just couldn't believe what was happening, how I'd have got there. I don't really remember how I got there. I don't remember any of it properly. I just couldn't believe what had gone on. And I knew then that Pendlebury was lying and they knew everything was going on. And it's just, you can't believe that people who you believe in would lie to you like that. Anyway, the next morning, I was woke up by the tea trolleys and everything, and I went on Daniel's ward. I got the boys ready. Got the boys ready, and we went on the ward to Daniel, and he looked rosier, and he was sat up in bed. And Maureen came up and she said, "He wants to speak to you now. Do you want to go to the office?" I said, "Yeah." So I took the boys. I said to Daniel, "See you later, alligator." That's what he used to say. And we went down to the ward, to the office. Maureen took the two boys and I went in with... Yeah. And he sat down beside him and he said, "We've done lots of tests on Daniel while we've had him these few hours, and plus Middlesbrough had done the same." He said, "And I hate to tell you this, but what you think is actually right." And he had an immune deficiency syndrome. And I'm like, "Well, what's that?" And he explained it to me. And I said, he said, "But he could die within the next 6 weeks." I'm like, how can this be happening when all I've done is trusted the National Health Service and the government or whatever, anybody, for it to be happening to my son? And he said, he said, "Really, you'll have to pretend that you're on holiday so that I can treat Daniel," because I was out of their catchment area. So he kept Daniel and he said, "I'll bombard him with everything I've got. I have got other children in the clinic that are at the same stage as Daniel, and some of them have actually gone into remittance, and they're still here, thank God. But unfortunately, we have lost a couple. But I'll do the best I can to help you and to help Daniel. So I said, right. So that's where we stayed, really.
And you don't have a complete set of Daniel's records, but the records that you do have show that at Newcastle, the HIV test was undertaken on the 11th of September 1985.
Yeah.
So that's when communicated the diagnosis to you.
Yeah.
It also told you about the rest of the family needing to be tested.
Yes, we was all tested. My husband was away, he was a farmer, so he used to work away. So he was away at the time. And then when he came back, he had to go up to Newcastle and be tested, and we was all okay.
And you said in your statement, Maggie, that when you were having this discussion with and asking if there was anything could be done or if Daniel could be cured, you were screaming, saying, "I've killed my son."
I've killed my son. Because that's the way, I was the one that was injecting him. And then I was thinking about my mum and our Ronald, and that's what it feels like. If you're injecting somebody with something that's a killer, then it's your fault. And I still feel like that today. And there's nothing I can say more about that, because that's how I feel.
So you made arrangements to stay with a friend in the local area.
I did.
So that Daniel could continue to be under the care of Newcastle, because
Yeah.
you didn't want him going back to Pendlebury.
No, never. And we went up and down from Darlington to Newcastle every day. And the hospital helped me out, and backwards and forwards, you know, staying at my friends.
And you, at the point in time came where you decided to rent somewhere. You saved some money to rent, and you found a farmhouse in a secluded area.
Yeah, I did. I found this ad in the paper for the farmhouse to let, so I thought, well, we'll be safe there, like you do. So I rented the farmhouse, and we was there something like about 5 or 6 months, and we got a letter off the farmer, and he said he'd like to vacate immediately because your son could contaminate my 2,000 turkeys. And the only people who knew anything about Daniel or his status was the Social Security and the Social Services. Nobody else. And there were nobody for miles, so it's not as if we're going to shout from 3 tops. They were the only people that knew anything.
And it was just as you'd moved into the farmhouse that you finally told Daniel.
I went for a walk through a field full of daffodils, picking them. And he was helping me to pick them, and I sat down with him and I explained to him that he couldn't allow anyone to help him to give him an injection, only me. And if he was given an injection or he had a bleed or he fell over and cut himself, he couldn't let anybody anywhere near him because it could make him really poorly. And he said, "Is that what I am? I'm really poorly." I said, "Yes, you are really poorly, but you're a lot better now than you was." And I said, "But you might get poorly again." And he just went, "Oh, right, okay, Mum." What could he say?
He was 14 then. After you'd got the letter from the farmer asking you to vacate the property because of Daniel's condition, your car was vandalised.
Yes.
Your
the car
tyres
was-
were slashed.
Yeah, it was daubed all over my car. They
Were
smashed
they-
me with AIDS written all over it and crosses.
You ended up homeless for a couple of weeks, living in your
Living
car
in my car, yeah.
with Daniel. You found somewhere else for about 3 months, but what happened there?
They found out again and they daubed the house. Smashed my car, well, put knives in my car wheels and threw paint on the car. We had to leave in the middle of the night.
And that
Find
happened
somewhere else. That happened about 4 times.
4 times that happened. And you remember going into a shop? and that shopkeeper tipping the change into your hands from a height so he wouldn't have to touch you.
Yeah, I had to pick it up off the floor. I had to pick it up because we didn't have any money.
And you
Every
were
penny
treated-
counted.
Sorry, Maggie, carry on.
Every penny counted, so I had to grovel on the floor to put the money up.
And you described it as being treated as though you had leprosy.
Yeah. I didn't care for me, it's my sons, that's more important for them.
Both your other sons have given statements to the inquiry, and I'm going to just read a passage from one of their statements, which talks from their perspective about the treatment that you were all receiving at that time.
Yeah.
He says this: there was an enormous stigma surrounding HIV at the time of Daniel's diagnosis, which affected the whole family. I began to notice that everyone was avoiding Daniel and the whole family. Parents would not allow their children to mix with us. I used to feel like people were always looking at me and talking behind my back. Even the teachers at school treated me completely differently. At its worst, the stigma was so bad that my parents' properties were actually vandalised and we were subjected to outright harassment. We had red crosses painted on our front door on numerous occasions. On another, our windows were smashed during the night, waking us all up. We received many nuisance phone calls at random times of the day and night. People would also send all sorts of tradesmen to our door.
Undertakers, fire engines.
Even undertakers. And he believed they did this to bother you and try and drive you out of the area.
Yeah.
And that was treatment that you received, but also Daniel's father, who was at that time living in Manchester.
Well, one of my sons had gone back to live with his dad, and the eldest one stayed with me. So it was obviously still going on where we were before.
Over the next few years, how was Daniel's health?
He wasn't too bad, actually. He sort of... Well, he picked himself up and he wouldn't let anybody give him his injections. He used to do it himself, unless he had a bad arm, and then I'd do it or whatever. And he seemed to be okay, and then he ended up being really thin and not eating, and went back to the RVI, and, well, they thought he'd die, so he nearly died on us twice. And then he got thrush, which stopped him eating altogether. So from, like, November to August, when he died, he didn't eat a thing. He just lived on ice cubes that I made for him with fruit juices and crushed up fruit to make him have some kind of vitamins to go in his system, because he couldn't eat. The thrush was that bad he could peel it off his tongue. He starved to death. Sorry.
There's no need at all to apologise, Maggie. If you need a break,
All right, cool.
you're okay.
It's all right.
You've said how you and he would spend hours talking about his illness.
Why me? I couldn't answer any questions because I didn't know myself. I don't know where it come from, what happened. I don't know who did it. I wish to God I did. But I don't know. I didn't know if I couldn't answer any questions for him. But he wasn't scared to die. He knew he was going to die. He'd already nearly died twice. He just knew. And his last words were, "Get him, Mum. Get him," for what they've done.
One point, you and Daniel talked about driving the car over a cliff.
Over a cliff, yeah. We thought that was a damn good idea at the time. But he never gave me a chance to do that because he wouldn't go in hospital until it was the last few hours.
He was in and out of hospital.
He went in on the night time, and he was dead by 10 to 6 the next morning. Because he didn't want to go to the last minute. So that's what he did. I got him to the hospital and I couldn't even carry him out of the car, and he was so thin, and he was 6'1", and he weighed 6 stone. And the chap came out of the hospital and he picked him up like he was a doll and carried him in for me because I couldn't carry him. I couldn't pick him up because it was killing me.
That was the 19th of August 1992 that Daniel died.
Yeah,
20 years old.
he would have been 21 in the September.
What happened in terms of the arrangements for Daniel's funeral?
Do you really want me to tell that?
Entirely up to you. Put it in your statements over your sons. So it's only if you want to, Maggie.
Well, going back to the house where I lived in Stockton, and the funeral directors did it for us. They picked him up from the hospital. And Daniel's wish was to be buried in Manchester, where he came from. And they said the only way that they could get Daniel to Manchester was to put him in a wooden box and cover him with sawdust. And he had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin. Obviously, so I couldn't contaminate the dead. That's the only thing I can think of that for. And by this time, my sons had come up and a couple of my friends. And my middle son took all the seats out of Daniel's car, and we all slid the coffin in, covered him with a tablecloth, and we drove him all the way back to Manchester.
So you and Daniel's brothers were determined to honour his wishes?
Yeah, nobody was covering my son with sawdust or putting him in a box either. So when I got to the other end, I had to get another undertaker, and he thought he was coming to the house to see a body, and when he saw the coffin, he couldn't believe what we'd done. He just looked at us and just... It was like an astonishment on his face, and we explained the situation, and he just took over from there, and he was lovely.
It was years after Daniel's death that you discovered that he'd also been infected with hepatitis C.
I got a phone call from the RBI in Newcastle because I'd moved on back. And they told me there was a form I had to fill in for, I forgot now, a payment.
For the Skipton Fund.
That's it, Skipton Fund. But they filled most of it in for me, and all I had to do was add a little bit on the bottom and sign it. And I sent it back to them, and I got a payment off the Skipton Fund, and I shared it between my boys. Shared it between the boys. And that was it.
You've mentioned in your statement involvement in some form of litigation and having to sign something, and in your statement you thought you'd had to sign the Official Secrets Act.
Yeah, but now I realise it's not the Secrets Act.
I think it was maybe in a waiver to do with the
You can't
litigation.
tell anybody anything, you can't talk about it. And while Dalian was alive, I was doing an innocent victims campaign, and I had to stop doing that, or else nobody could get a payment. You could not get a payment off anybody if you didn't sign this waiver. And every haemophiliac must know we all had to sign it and say nothing.
We've mentioned your cousin Ronald.
Yeah, I grew up with Ronald, who was like my brother, and he died of he was haemophiliac, and he died of AIDS and Hep C as well.
And that was in 1994, March 1994, I think.
Was it 94? Yeah. This is his sister. And nobody knew he had Hep C either until after his death. No more than I knew Daniel had Hep C until after his death. So they must have had all these things anyway.
Well, we mentioned your mother being a haemophiliac, and she herself had received factor treatments.
Yeah.
Your understanding is she was under the care of Manchester Royal Infirmary and
All
she
alive.
received factor 8 there.
Yeah.
And she was infected with hepatitis C
Yes.
in consequence of her treatment. What do you know about the circumstances in which she found that out?
Well, I phoned her from the RVI to tell her, and I think it was when Danny had his knee done, I can't remember, but I phoned her anyway to tell him that Danny was okay. And she said, I've got something, they've told me I've got something in my blood. So I said, what do you mean you've got something in your blood? I don't know, I've got something in my blood, but I don't know what it is. So I said, oh, okay then, we'll talk, because I was in the office of the Infielder Centre. And I said, okay, well, I'll sort it when I get home, like you do. So she said, okay. Anyway, when Daniel died and I went back home, I obviously took up the treatment of looking after my mum again. And obviously, our Ronald was still alive, so I was helping him as well. And a friend of hers had come to visit her that she knew from the RVI, and she was telling my mum all what she had, that she had this Hep C, and it was contagious, and other people get it, and different things like that. And my mum, she just lost it. She just changed her completely. She wouldn't let people in the flat. She wouldn't talk to anybody. She just changed completely into somebody like a, I don't know, she was like a mad woman, wasn't she? She was just like a mad woman. Because she thought that everybody didn't like her and everybody was frightened of her. This was in her mind. Nobody really knew anything, but it's the way my mum was dealing with it. And like I said, she wouldn't let anybody in the house or anything.
And she'd been a strong, independent lady.
Very much so. I'm very much a lady. And this went on for about a year or something, didn't it? And then I took her to a routine appointment, and this doctor, can I mention his name?
Yes.
Dr. A at Manchester Royal Infirmary. He also told us that she'd been in contact with variant CJD. And I asked him about this status of Hep C and how long she'd had it, and he said, it's nothing to do with you. In other words, mind your own business. And I said, well, my mum can't tell, because obviously they knew since she was little. They knew that she couldn't read or write because she never went to school. So how could she tell me anything? Only what this woman had told her. And he just dismissed it completely. Didn't want to talk about it. And didn't want to talk about variant CJD. He just said, there might have been, an infection from this factor VIII.
Your mother's health deteriorated.
Fast.
She was in a nursing home towards the end because you yourself had serious health problems at the time.
I had organ failure, yeah. And she was living with me at the time, my mum. And she had to go into a nursing home. And when she went into the nursing home, she was vicious, violent. If I went to visit her, she'd be pulling me hair, she'd be fighting me. But she was doing that before I took poorly because she didn't know who I was. And she had this weird idea that everybody was going to kill her. She went funny, didn't she? Bless her. And bless her, I wanted to kill her at the time, really. And while she was in the nursing home, she stopped eating and got very thin and very frail. Then I got this. I just do a drink. I got this phone call off the nursing home asking me, telling me that my mum had took to her bed and she wouldn't get out of her bed. And she wouldn't eat or anything, so I wasn't fit enough to drive then, so I got a taxi to the home to see my mum. And she was just like a withered old lady. She was yellow. Her eyes was like sunk in her head. And I said, I'll take her to Manchester Royal Infirmary. So I ordered another taxi and I got her in the wheelchair. And I put in the taxi and I took her to Manchester Royal Infirmary, to the Infield. Well, it wasn't a centre then, it was just the blood bank where they used to go with them days. And they told me there and then that she was dying of cirrhosis of the liver, and it wouldn't be very long before she died. So I went back to the nursing home and I explained it to Margaret, who owned the nursing home. Lovely lady, she was brilliant with my mum. And then I went back home, and then about 2 or 3 days later I got this phone call that they'd had to take her to Crumpsall Hospital in Manchester, because that was the nearest hospital, and she died there.
And that was December 2005.
Yeah.
Well, there's one of the documents that you've given to the inquiry about your mum is a letter from one of the doctors that says that the hepatitis C wasn't a contributory cause of her death. Do you think that's right?
No, I don't.
And why do you think that?
Because they told me at Manchester Royal exactly what she had, which was, this was just a, what do you call it, when they've got Hep C and it goes further along, this was just what happens, cirrhosis.
Is the word you've used in your statement?
Yeah, but there was no medical records of that. In fact, there's no medical records of my mum's as far as I know, because they burnt them all, because I've tried and better tried and not been able to get any. The only thing I managed to get hold of was what the nursing home actually kept for them. And on the nursing home documents, the doctor that took care of my mum, it's all crossed out as to what was wrong with my mum. Well, it's in most medical records, isn't it? They're all crossed out. So that was what happened with my mum.
And Maggie, is there anything you'd like to say about how the experiences you've described, the death of Daniel, your cousin, your mum, and all your caring responsibilities impacted on you and your family?
It shouldn't have happened. Why did it happen? We all want to know why. Why? What happened? Did they do it for the money? Because that's the only thing I can think of. They must have been getting backhanders from somebody, I'm sorry, but what else would you... They've committed mass murder. And I think it should be treated like the Nuremberg trials. And I think they should all be put away. I'm sorry, but I do.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, Maggie?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to every one of you, everybody that's been helping us and standing beside us for justice, because we've had so many people who's tried, and where has it ever got us? Nowhere. But we actually have faith in all of you. And I hope to God that we're all still here to find out what has happened.
I'm just going to ask Mr Snowden if there's any questions. No. Thank you. Sir?
I have no questions either, but I do have some thanks for you for coming to tell us about your son and your cousin and your mother.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We'll take a break till 3 o'clock, when I think we're due to hear from Megan and Robert.
That's right, sir.
3 o'clock.